Well, to say that
disease,
would be a little crass too. I would go back to what you heard Gabriel say. As an example, the solid data that he just spoke about was sort of stunning to I, and everyone else, because I thought it was donuts and sugar that gave you the diabetic conditions. I knew animal fat was involved. You didn't have to be smart for that. Just looked at the size of people and what they ate that ended up with diabetes. But what we didn't know till a decade and a half ago is that animal fat spikes insulin more than sugar does. I don't care what sugar, much more. I mean, it's like so when you eat one egg and you go up, dozens of percent, and that's a factual statement. This isn't something he pulled out of the air. That's a fact. And if you look at my old diet, I was surprised I didn't have diabetes by the time I was 6 months old. All I ate was animal fat and sugar. That was it. So to go back to answer your question, I think anyone that's attempting to do the right thing, I encourage. But we have to also take into account there's so many ill people in this country and around the planet today that some of them have to be a little bit more adherent and learn more, and hopefully get into the hands of the ever-growing group of doctors who are leaving mainstream medicine and learning these things and are mature enough to want to keep up with what we now know, not what we knew 6 months ago or a year or 5 years ago. And that's my comment. So congratulations if you're going plant-based. We encourage that. But to say, eat all the fruit you want, I don't think anyone should do that.
Well, right. But obviously within normal restrictions.
Well, Brian and I obviously are in agreement on all this. And it's just important to hear that. Now, there is a difference between cancer, where zero fruit is the by far.
Is that no? Avocado is technically a fruit. Does that include avocados, or what fruits are you?
Not for me. It doesn't.
Sorry.
No.
Yeah. So I mean, Gabriel's correct. We say fruit. We're not talking about botanical genetics. We're literally talking about the sugar content. Now, a red pepper is fruit too, but we serve them here.
Okay.
And so a cucumber is fruit. So
right. Okay.
So, I mean, so what I think when you hear Gabriel and I speak about fruit, we're talking about the ones I loved, mangoes and cherries, and my favorite, dried fruit. That's a highway to get sick. And what Gabriel just commented, and I'll answer his question, are we much more concerned about people who have cancer with fruit or sugar, period, than people with viruses? Yes, but if you have a common cold, if you eat too much sugar, it increases it. But nowhere near the amount that you would see with cancer.
Yeah. And also the distinction again, fructose is about 10 times more. Cancer cells love fructose about 10 times more than they love glucose.
That's right. That's right.
So there is a big difference here. So when you talk about fruit being good for for cancer, it's really worse than even glucose.
Much worse. And I'll tell you how we learned that. Before that data came out, we had a doc came here, an MD, and he healed liver cancer. And he was working at a big university hospital, and he called me and said, I want to help you. I kept saying, no, just be an example and be quiet so you don't lose your medical license. He used to laugh. And he called me one day and he said, you keep talking about fruit. He said, I happen to have access to PET scans. And we're going to perform today at this university hospital 3 PET scans, and we're going to use fruit sugar versus the glucose they normally use. And he called me back and said the uptake of the fruit sugar that he, by the way, made at home. He made a gallon of apple juice, organic apple juice, gave some to his children. He wasn't drinking it himself, had his graduate students distill it. It was almost 2 cups. A cup and 3/4, and literally used it without the administration of the hospital knowing it. And he said it was remarkable, the uptake of it. It was sort of like wild, like wild savages grabbing that. And where I really got to be okay going to a medical school and speaking about no fruit for people is when they invented PET scans, because that's when I got them to shut down. They would say, well, there's no proof that sugar feeds cancer. And I said, well, then how come you're using it for one of the most effective scans we have for cancer? And you actually see the epicenter of the cancer. And what I love about PET scans, although they have now used radioactivity with it too, which isn't smart, is where it metastasized. You can see where it's going to trail like stars going out to the liver or to the kidney or the bone, whatever it may be. So, so Gabriel's correct. So when you're having chronic fatigue syndrome, if you eat 2 or 3 pieces of fruit a week that are not dried bananas, which hurt your teeth or dried pineapples, my old favorite, that probably won't do a whole lot of harm. But if you do what I used to do, drink a half a gallon of freshly made organic apple juice or carrot juice or beet, that's going to do you harm.
And how have you noticed removing fruit from your patients? How has the impact been on their cancer, their viruses? Well,
like people that were not getting well, hundreds and thousands now over the last 40 years, got well. And the speed, the expedition of the recovery was significantly more. I would like to think it's between 2.5 and 3.5 times faster. So, that I don't have scientific data to back, but after observing hundreds and thousands of people that recovered and being around when we didn't do that, that's my hypotheses on that now.
Okay. So Dr. Cousens, I'm sure you're familiar with Dr. Joel Fuhrman. He has said that he sees a lot of vegans, long-term vegans, and, in the plant-based community, not that vegan means plant-based, but in the plant-based community, you kind of feel like you're invincible. You really should be healthy. And he's seeing patients, and I don't know what kind of numbers, but he's seeing them come in with dementia. What do you think about that? What would be the cause in a plant-based diet? Is something lacking? Is there something in there like fruit, for example, that could be detrimental to the health of people who are plant-based that could be contributing to the dementia that Dr. Joel Fuhrman is seeing in his practice?
Well, I'm glad he's observing it because it is definitely an issue. And one of the main issues is that a high carbohydrate diet tends to move you towards dementia. Now, that's really important to understand. I don't really recommend a high complex carbohydrate diet. Some of the people out there are recommending 70% complex carbohydrate and little fat and little protein. To me, it's just the opposite. So the research out there, and I will be talking about it in my lecture too, is that people over 70 who are eating a high complex carbohydrate diet actually have 4 times more cognitive decline. Now, that means your mind isn't working so well, right? So that's what Joel Fuhrman is talking about. That's one. Second problem is we are unique individuals. We actually aren't cows eating just grass. And so on a vegan diet, to be successful, which is the name of the game, from my point of view, you need to organize your diet to best fit your constitution. That's really, really important. And if you're just going to do one kind of diet, high complex carbohydrate, which I say accelerates aging, number one, and actually decreases your cognitive abilities over time, that really isn't the best idea. So that's what I'm talking about. And I will say that my diet is a low complex carbohydrate diet and higher in protein and plant fat. Okay.
So what are you specifically eating in lieu of what most plant-based people are eating, which is the high complex carbohydrates?
Well, I'm at a little bit at a different stage. Okay, so at 80 years around the planet, and doing on an average of 1,800 push-ups a few times a week.
Wow.
And hundreds of 900 sit-ups. I consider myself a kind of spiritual athlete. Okay. So get the idea that what I'm doing is successful. You don't get the 1,800 push-ups if you aren't, right? And endurance and flexibility, even compared to when I was 60, where I did 601 push-ups. And I thought that was a lot. Okay. It's like, well, and now, okay. So the answer is, I don't eat that much. The less you eat, the longer you live. That's the basic thing. So the truth is, I just have a salad. I eat once a day.
Okay.
That's partly what goes on. And I eat somewhere between 12 and 2, probably closer to 2. And I basically have a pretty big salad, not super big, and with my avocado and with some nuts and seeds. And that's pretty much what that's my only meal.
And
I
what kind
don't
of
really eat
calories?
after that.
What kind of calories, like daily calories, are you getting in a day? Like
Well,
what should and is this something that you said everyone's is different? Is this something that you think that, like it would be the ideal way of eating is the mono meal, or 1 meal a day? And then how many calories does a person need? Maybe, you said you're 80, I'm 50. If, the 20-year-old, versus a 50-year-old versus an 80-year-old, what kind of calories?
well, I'm going to answer it in a different way. I
Sure.
don't count calories.
Okay.
What I count as, are you strong? Do you have endurance? Do you have energy all day long? Are you sleeping well? Do you understand what I'm saying? In other words, I'm
Absolutely.
looking at the overall result. Calories are, in a sense, irrelevant in the way I'm talking about. What is your result?
Mhm.
So what I recommend people is create a balanced diet. About 30% of the population need a slightly higher protein diet. 70% need a slightly higher protein diet, which is about 70 grams a day. And about 30% need a lower protein diet, which is about 35 grams a day. That's still not a lot of protein. A meat eater is getting way more than that. And of course, they're not as healthy either. So first you have to find out your constitution. That's why I'm hesitant to say, what am I eating, if you get what I'm saying.
Mhm.
So I also take a tablespoon of E3 Live.
Okay.
Um,
Which is
and
one of our sponsors, by the way. So
yes, I know. That's why I mentioned it. So, but here's the point. At 60, I was struggling to do 25 pull-ups. I know that's a lot for some people, but I was struggling. And said, what's wrong with this picture? And then I realized that with age, above 60, you have a slight greater need for protein.
okay.
In your mid-40s, people, particularly the researchers on men, they were getting too much protein. It was increasing rates of cancer. Okay, doubling the rate of rates of death and significantly increasing rates of cancer. Okay, so it's like, well, that's not so good. But then with age, your protein goes up. So I look at that and I said, okay, well, I'm getting 10% protein. So I added a 1 tablespoon of E3 Live, and within 2 weeks, I went from 25 pull-ups up to 100 pull-ups.
Okay. Wow.
Now,
That's
I
crazy.
get what I'm saying. It's not about
Yeah.
me. I'm trying to make a point
Right.
because
Yes.
I'm who I research on. Okay.
Sure.
Okay. And so what I just did is made one slight adjustment and had major improvement in physical strength. Is that making sense what I'm saying?
That's absolutely making sense. Yeah.
So I strongly recommend people are always adjusting to their age and to their life situation and so forth. So that's I think the important concept here. So as they say, some people need more protein than others. We have it's on chromosome 19. It tells you how much protein, how much fat, how much carbohydrate you should have. And the idea is how to figure that out for yourself by trial and error. Like I just gave an example. Hey, you need more protein. Okay, take a tablespoon, see what happens.
Okay. I think I'm gonna have to try that out myself. I'm not quite up to 25 pull-ups yet. So,
But the point I'm making is when you're pushing the extreme athlete type thing, a little bit makes a big difference. That's the research. That's how I kind of get that. I mean, I see what happens with clients too. Just like Brian, but I always like to experiment myself before I recommend things. So that is, I think, an important way. And I never think about carbohydrates. I mean, calories. What I think about is the quality and energy of the food. That's why we talk about live food, because it has a significantly more energy in it, literally. So that kind of, I think, answers the question. It has to be individualized. One, it has to fit your constitution, has to fit where you are in your life cycle.
mhm.
For a child, you need a whole lot more protein. But at 65, 80, you need less protein. And then
Okay.
you just have to balance it to get optimum result. That's the concept, rather than how many calories you should have, or this percentage or that. You have to keep adjusting. We're all unique in a way. I mean, there's average, as I say, 30% of the people, like I'm in that 30%, just need 35 grams, and 70% are going to need 70, 75 grams of protein. Do you see what I mean?
Yes.
And that's the key concept. You must individualize.
Great. Thank you. Brian, I will not ask you how many push-ups you do.